Today's episode of This Week in Startups is brought to you by HipChat. Bring your team to life with persistent team chat, file sharing, and integrations with the software you use. A team communication tool built for business. HipChat is free forever, and HipChat Plus, including video and screen sharing, is free for 6 months for the first 1,000 listeners at hipchat.com/twist. And by Walker Corporate Law, a boutique law firm specializing in the representation of entrepreneurs. Visit them at walkercorporatelaw.com. And by AWS Activate, the Amazon Web Services startup program. It's easy to start and scale your business with AWS. Visit aws.amazon.com/activate.
Hey everybody, today on This Week in Startups, Dataclysm. This is an amazing book by Christian Rudder, who works at OKCupid, one of the co-founders, in fact, and he studied the data of people while they're dating, and he took that data, which is available for the first time, and he was able to figure out who dates who and why and how we rate each other, essentially what we do that we're not aware of based on this tremendous data set. This episode is incredibly controversial. We're going to talk about race, gender, dating, sex, all of these things, including Facebook's negative trials and tests by putting negative content into your feed, and what is the responsibility of startups doing these tests. An amazing book you should buy right now, and an amazing episode you should probably listen to twice. Stick with us.
That's what it's all about, man. They said money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah, money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah, we ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
Hey everybody, welcome to This Week in Startups. I'm your host, Jason Calacanis. You've listened to the show before, I'm assuming. If you haven't, the title should give you an idea of what we do here. Every week, twice a week, we talk about startups, we talk about entrepreneurship, we talk about the funding and the failures and the fun of building new things in the world. Now, one of the great technological achievements of the internet is something I completely missed out on. It's called dating, online dating. Now, as you guys might assume, I did very well when I was single. I'm sure all of you assume this, like you've been watching the show, I'm a funny guy, and I grew up in New York. I was an amazing single guy in New York. Let's just leave it at that. But I've been married for a long time, 10 years. I've been with my wife for 12 years or something like that. So I missed completely the online dating game. But watching this has been fascinating to me, because it was the place where nerds went to meet girls in the early days of the interwebs. In fact, in the 80s and 90s, I did see a little bit of this. It was called BBSs, bulletin board systems. And there were people who were socially awkward who went on to bulletin board systems, and they would talk and they'd chat, and then they would meet somebody, and then they'd go on a date, and magic would happen. But sometime in the 90s, people said, hey, wait a second, let's try to make a formula here. Let's make a device. Let's make a UX, a user experience around dating. That's not just you randomly met somebody online in an AOL chat room or a Prodigy chat room or CompuServe or BBSs. Anyway, this stuff has then resulted in a massive sea change. It's not nerds and awkward people who go online to get dates. It's everybody. In fact, now when I meet people who are trying to find a mate, trying to get married, trying to find a boyfriend or girlfriend, it seems to me that the highest quality people are online. The highest quality people are not going to bars to find a significant other. They're going online. So the whole game has changed. And there is, as part of this, a massive amount of data that's been collected about how people mate and how people meet people. Now, in that data is what we all see or we would see at the bars and the clubs in the 80s and 90s and even today. And Christian Rudder was one of the co-founders of OKCupid. Now, we've all heard of OKCupid. There's like 4 or 5 dating sites that ever became meaningful in the world. eHarmony to get married, Plenty of Fish, which was the free one, Tinder now, Match.com, and OKCupid. Those are like the big 5 of dating. There were a bunch of little ones like JDate and this date and that date, vertical ones. But anyway, what makes Christian Rudder interesting is he's a data nerd. And he wrote this incredible book, Dataclysm. So everybody stop for a second, pause the show. And go buy Dataclysm. I'll be here when you get back. Everybody go buy Dataclysm. It's got a gorgeous cover too, by the way. I think when you could, this is actually a really good point. If you had this book and you were like in a cafe or something like that, you're probably going to meet some really interesting people because they're going to think you're smart. But Dataclysm, who we are, when we think no one's looking, huh? Now think that's really an interesting title. Who we are, and then there's a little asterisk there. That means more to come. And then buried down here, when we think no one's looking. This book is fascinating. I'm reading it right now. And Emmy Award-winning producer Jackie said, we got to get this guy on the show because he's brilliant and the insights are amazing. So welcome to the show, Christian Rudder.
I'm extremely happy to be here. That's a great intro, man.
It's just a little intro to, I try to get people to build it up a little bit here so that they're,
Sure.
When we say we're going to get into data,
Right.
Everybody glosses over.
Right, no, I've
But
seen
when
it
I tell
happen.
you this data is spectacular, you put together, you're a brave man.
Well, I mean, OKCupid it's an easy source, because it's like literally very sexy. It's people give so much of themselves to a dating site. You need to know age, sex, location, just to get back to the kind of like chat room origins of the whole thing. So you just know a lot about people.
All right, I'm just going to go for it. I'm literally going to go
Please,
because
just
you had
go
all
on.
this data.
Yep.
We'll get into your story in a minute. White women, Asian women, black women, Latinos, and the range of women's scores. Holy cow. You saw all this data and you said, let me look for patterns.
Yeah.
Explain to people who are looking at a graph right now what they see here.
Oh, okay. So, so the up to the y-axis. So that's the 1 through 5. We let people rate each other on a 5-star system, like
Right.
movies on Netflix or whatever.
Sure.
And these are what they're called box plots, which are kind of a pretentious statistical visualization. But basically, this graph shows that black women are sort of uniformly rated about a star lower than the women of the other three groups. On average. So,
Wow.
and it's not, and especially it's showing that it's not this kind of bimodal thing. Like I told somebody the other day, meaning there's kind of like two, you can imagine a scenario where there's some, say, black women that maybe they have kids or something like this, that's somehow unattractive to everyone else. I don't know. And they would be rated very poorly. Meanwhile, everyone else who didn't have kids in that population would be rated normally.
Right, because kids would be like, oh my God, I
Right,
go on a date with
I'm not
somebody.
up for this.
You know,
Right.
I got to come home to their apartment and there's a bunch of, or house and there's a bunch of kids.
Right. But it's just a uniform kind of like blanket discount.
Wow.
And not only is it applied uniformly, but the kind of the, if you go look at that, so that's the people who are being voted upon. If you look at the people who do the voting, their scores have the same distribution of the scores that they give. So it's not just some like small cohort of racists giving out crappy votes. It's just kind of uniformly on a person-to-person level, everything is discounted.
Wow.
Yeah, it's intense.
That's really intense. And
Yeah.
when you discovered this as somebody doing data analysis,
Uh-huh.
what was your initial reaction? Because you made a lot of graphs here and you looked at stuff, and
Yep.
you must have said, hey, I wonder how race plays into beauty and scores.
Right, that's exactly how it started.
And nobody had seen this before,
No.
and you uncovered this.
Right.
What's that moment like where you all of a sudden plotted? Did you just immediately say there's something wrong with the data?
Well, I mean, look, I think any sensible American imagines that there's going to be some racial component to this thing,
Yeah.
right? I was surprised at the kind of depth of the discount, so to speak. And also, that data that you guys just saw is just from OKCupid, but you see the same pattern on, Match.com. You see it on another site called Date Hookup, which over-indexes with blacks and Latinos. So it's not just like, OKCupid is probably a little bit more white, maybe a little bit more Asian than
Right.
the world generally. Date Hookup is the other way around. And so it's not just a function of a particular user base. It's just kind of a thing,
Right.
in the online dating world.
When you
generally.
find data like this, and I guess this is another look at the same data, his race, her race. And when you look at this kind of
Right.
data, do you try to figure out why? Did you go to people who scored people low and then do a survey? Or did you do any further research to figure out what is the issue?
No, I didn't, honestly. And I guess that could have been interesting. I just, especially working at OKCupid, just a lot of this research we do just in the course of running the business.
Of course.
So the idea of going and surveying some 1,000 of our millions of users is just kind of, we never do it.
Did you ever think, like, maybe I shouldn't release this data? It's too
That did cross our mind.
polarizing? Like,
Yeah.
or what's your theory on data and releasing it? And because it is, in a way, doesn't it hurt when you release that? Like, I feel in a way like sad or hurt, and like I'm not even,
Right. Yeah.
the party who's affected.
It is a bummer for sure, and we did talk about it. I mean, we first started publishing this stuff in 2009, so kind of like way before people were really talking about data, the kind of human interaction data. And we did talk about it, and we were also worried that people would be like, well, everyone on OkCupid is racist. I'm not using that site.
So I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a concern too. But we just decided to go for it. We've always tried to be transparent, a little provocative. That's sort of like OkCupid's vibe. So this fits those two.
What was the reaction? Did you get that reaction that OkCupid people are racist?
Not that one too much, because I think again, kind of in the same way that any reasonable person would expect there to be a racial trend. I don't think anybody thinks, especially because I've since gone through other dating sites data as well. I don't think anybody thinks it's something peculiar to OkCupid. If anything, we should be less racist. Like we're kind of more upscale, more coastal, more urban, all this stuff.
Well, is that true? Because we've had this discussion on the show, and people are having it in life. And listen, this is being taped at a time when we have the Eric Garner case and just all kinds of insanity going on with police departments and race, which could really use some data
for sure.
analysis, to be totally honest. And I'm sure a lot will occur now. But when you look at this, what can we infer about the state of race in America? Especially with young people. Are young people less race-based in their choices of dating?
No, they're kind of the same. They're kind of the same.
So it's not getting better?
It's not necessarily getting better, no. And like if you go through the data of the, I think now 6 years that we've kind of been collecting this exact same type of stuff, it's the same pattern every year, basically. It's not really getting better. And I guess the thing that I like about OkCupid's data, I mean, a counter-argument against this stuff as well. It's just in dating and it's just romance. But this is all from people basically in the kind of Tinder-style interface of flipping through photos and making a judgment quickly. And it's the kind of first blush of what you think of somebody,
Right.
And like people are entitled to their own idea of who they want to sleep with, right?
Right.
We can't make somebody want to get together with a person of a different race if they don't want to. That's just how life is,
Right.
But I think so much of it happens sort of unconsciously. I don't think there's people that come to the site and are like, fuck it, I'm only gonna swipe right on white guys or white women or whatever, But I think it just kind of happens slowly by degrees that these scores are built up over time, and lo and behold, you kind of wake up and you're like, oh wow, I see that one group is just uniformly treated lower than another.
All right. So now 2 more graphs we're going to do when we get back from commercial break. The first is, how do Asian, Black, Latino, and white men and Asian, Black, white, and Latino women actually, how attracted are they to each other? As well as, how do women rate men and how do women rate men? Men rate women.
Right.
Which is really interesting.
In aggregate.
On what should be a bell curve, but is far from it in one of the 2 cases.
Sure, right.
Really fascinating data, and it's not maybe what you think when we get back on This Week in Startups. Hey, everybody. I'm so excited about the next sponsor we have on This Week in Startups. Remember, you may not know this, but we do what's called white-labeled advertising here at This Week in Startups. The show has done so well after 5 years, and all of the loyal listeners who tweet the heck out of each episode and the sponsors, that we get to pick the partners in the show. How great is that? So what I do with my team once a year is we make a list of the 20 products that we love. And then we call those partners and say, congratulations, you are now able to give us your money and be a sponsor on This Week in Startups. I know it sounds insane, but that's whitelisted advertising. It's a big innovation I came up with. And at the top of that list is HipChat. Why? Because there is no other product I use more each day in business than HipChat. I am not kidding. Why? Because communications in startup companies is hard. It's very hard. If you talk to the top 100 startup companies in the world or big companies, and you ask the employees, how would you improve the company? Or what's wrong with the company? The number one answer always given is communication. And then if you ask the bottom 100 companies that are performing terribly, what's the biggest problem? It's communications. HipChat it has absolutely revolutionized this problem. It's persistent chat rooms. So what happens is, when you're on that email chain and you shouldn't be on this chain to begin with, and all of a sudden a reply all war starts? HipChat is a chat room where those people can pop up a chat room and say, hey, this is the chat room for the Android release. This is the chat room for our big festival where we're going to have an exhibitor at the launch festival. This is our hiring chat room. This is hiring for this one position that's super important. Then you invite people to that chat room. And instead of people talking about it in an email thread, they just go there. And what's great about it is, for me, if I'm not in the chat room, it will send me an email alert and tell me that I was mentioned in that chat room. And that's the magic of HipChat, is you take all these crazy email threads and you consolidate them down into persistent chat rooms. I use it all day long. I have chat rooms for the launch ticker, for This Week in Startups, for the launch festival. I have chat rooms for Inside.com, the Android version, the Web 2.0 version, the curators, the team leaders, etc. I even pop up chat rooms when we have an event. So when we had the Scale conference, we had one chat room for the Scale event, for the main auditorium, and then we had one for the CTO track. And I could be, when I was on stage asking questions, I would just look in the persistent chat room and I would pull a question from there. You can also search all the archives. It's on Android. It's on the web. There's a web version, obviously, for browsers. It's on iOS, obviously. But they also have like a Mac client. They also have it for Linux. Basically, they support everything. And it's free. That's the other amazing thing. There's other services out there that you can pay $6, $7, $8 a month for. It's ridiculous. It is free to use HipChat, and it's free forever. They also have HipChat Plus, which I highly recommend, and we use it because it has video and screen sharing, which works really well. Now, you can get it free for 6 months, but only the first 1,000 listeners who actually do this will get it. HipChat.com/twist. 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 I love HipChat. I am so happy that they have chosen to sponsor This Week in Startups because it is a wonderful product that I use all day long. And I'm going to be talking about this forever, but communication is absolutely critical in a startup company. And if you're there in the chat room in real time, moving discussions from a discussion for everybody to a discussion for a small number of people to one-on-one, it works wonders. It works wonders. And you know what? If you're the CEO or the founder, you're on the road. I constantly pop open my HipChat and I'm not kidding you, I'll be honest here, I'm at a poker game at night. And I'll open up HipChat, I'm not in a hand, and bang, I just bang out a couple of comments or thoughts I had, and I at somebody. And then they are out, I don't know, having dinner or a drink, and they'll HipChat me back. It's awesome. You're going to love it. Okay, enough. I could talk about HipChat all day. Let's get back to this amazing program. Hey, welcome back to This Week in Startups. My guest today is Chris Rudder of the amazing book that I insist all of you buy right now. That's right, I'm insisting you pause the show and buy Dataclysm, Who We Are, *, wait for it, there's the pause, When We Think No One's Looking, by Christian Rudder. It is an amazing book. I'm really enjoying it. I'm literally writing stuff in the notes like, wow, this is fascinating.
Thanks.
So let's keep going on the race and also on the gender issue. First, Here we go on this chart. Asian, Black, Latino, White, his race.
Yeah.
Her race, Asian, Black, Latino, White.
Right.
Normalized rating from men to women on OKCupid. So now what is this chart showing?
Well, this is kind of a more specific drill down of what we were looking at before, where you see that Asian, Latino, and white men give, say, black women a rating that's about 25% lower than
over
the norm.
A point lower.
Yeah, so over a point lower than the norm.
Point and a quarter.
Right, lower than the norm. And you can also see there on that diagonal, you can see Asian men rate Asian women slightly higher.
Almost a full
normal.
point.
Yeah. Same with Latino to Latino or Latina and white to white. And then it's just other than
so
those
there
two
is a
trends,
pattern of when the race is the same, you get a slight premium.
Yeah, there's kind of two significant trends that are going on. Yeah, there's same race is treated at a premium. Black women are discounted by other types of men,
except for black men who just score
black
them
men
normally.
Are just like racially neutral. I mean,
racially
these are very low.
Yeah.
Actually,
that's very interesting. So what this would say is, black men are the least racist.
Sure.
If you said the selection of gender was an indication of racism,
right?
Which is not true.
Well, it depends on how you want to look at it. I think on an individual level, I wouldn't call any person's voting pattern, as long as they were a person of general goodwill, racist. Right. If they liked Asian women or they didn't like black women or whatever.
But their preference.
But the preference, the aggregate preference, the kind of societal level preference, I think is racist. I don't think you can't make someone people love who they love, right?
Right.
And,
So you can't ascribe intent,
right,
like racist intent to it, certainly.
Exactly. Yeah, I think so.
But what would you say of the pattern of black men? They seem to rate people on beauty, not race.
Sure. Yeah, the race does not seem to be a factor in black men's mate selection, I guess is how I would put it.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And then, and it's the reason it's particularly striking is just on a numerical basis, +2, -1, +3, +4. It's statistically insignificant when 20 points equals a star.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Well, I mean, these are all significant. I mean, these 16 spaces together comprise, I think, like something like 61 million votes or something. So a tremendous amount of data went into each one of these squares.
What I'm saying is the difference isn't significant.
Yeah, it's extremely minor compared to the bigger numbers on the chart.
Right.
Yeah.
And what you said there was one other trend here.
So there's the diagonal, and then there's the diagonal, and then the vertical red. And those are the two trends. So.
Got it. Okay. Now let's look at this one here. Changes in final message and keystrokes. What is this?
This is the characters in final message. So each one of these dots, and I use some opacity so you can kind of get a sense of the depth here. Each dot on this, I think this is like 100,000 messages. Each dot is a message.
A message on OKCupid between two people.
From a man to a woman, the first contact.
The first contact from a man to a woman.
Right.
Got it.
And we log keystrokes,
Okay.
mostly for spam detection.
Sure.
And when I went through and looked at, in addition to the content of the message, which obviously we store.
Okay. So wait. Let me just make sure I understand that. Keystrokes would be how many keys I typed in.
How many times you hit the keyboard.
But the characters in the final message
is the text, the length of the string. That
so
you
if
sent.
there were 100 characters and 200 keystrokes, I edited it.
Yeah, sure. Right. You edited a lot. Yeah, right.
Got
So
it.
in the diagonal, obviously, is this parity. And as you can see, these type of messages, and this is logarithmic, so the type of message you just described, the 200 keystrokes to 100 characters in the final message, you'll kind of be along that diagonal Milky Way in there in that density. But you see these kind of like these vertical lines, and you see, oh, how did somebody have 1,000 character message with one keystroke? And it occurred to me, I mean, it's obvious now that one keystroke is Control V, people just pasting stuff in. So
they took the time to write it
Yeah.
in another editor because it was so important. They wanted spell check. They wanted this. They didn't want to lose it, maybe. Or
sure, I think that's a good point. That could be what's happening
I get
to
the
some
second
degree.
one.
But
I figured out the second one.
Most of it
they
is
have a standard response.
Yeah. So a standard first
template.
A standard first message, because you can see there's people that do maybe 5 keystrokes out of 1,000 characters. So they'll be like, hey Maria, I should change that one here. It'll be hey Linda or whatever.
Ooh.
So we see people repeating basically essentially the same message over and over again.
All right. So what did you learn from all this? I mean, you have those plumes of smoke, which mean cut and pasters.
Right. You learn that. First of all, it's incredibly common, and I think maybe 20% of the messages on OkCupid are in some way templatified from guys to women, which isn't. I mean, that sounds weird, but I thought about it more, and it's not that different than telling the same stories to people that you're trying to pick up. I mean, like how you got
Inviting
that scar.
people to the same dinner party.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Just running your shtick in one way or another. Right.
Right.
But people do it, and digitally just as they do in person. But it's actually this is just. I'm sure many of the people you've had on the show have talked about this. If you give people a set of rules in a system, they'll figure out a way to game it. For us here, it's guys trying to contact women, and they're like, well, all right, I'm gonna create something kind of that I think works. Control C, Control V, and just throw it out there, and I'll get as many replies as I can get, and it's like a numbers game, And there's a lot of people that approach dating like that. It's just a pure numbers game, and you see that it's not just like, hey, what's up, over and over again. Like these messages are very. Often the most successful ones of these cut and paste messages are very idiosyncratic, like, hey, I used to be a smoker, I love architecture, just like these kind of really crazy, almost like little short stories or poems that people are sending out to each other that describe them and they think is going to be a good hook to get a reply.
So to be fascinating to a woman.
Exactly, that's the goal. Right, exactly. Right.
Fascinating. This is what I know inherently.
Right, because you're a legendary ladies' man from
why
New York City.
Such a legend in New York was because I'll tell you what it was. I'm going to tell you some things I think.
All right. So
you tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Okay.
All right. Number one, I think if you are somebody who is enthusiastic about what you do in life, women find that absolute. And I can't speak to what men find attractive because I haven't dated many men. Just a couple. But the point is, I think that people who are enthusiastic about whatever it is they do, that's very attractive to women. Am I right or am I wrong? Or just the
That's true.
data?
I mean, I don't have any data on
Oh, you don't
that,
have data
but-
on that one?
No, but that also fits my intuition. Nobody wants to date somebody who's bored. 'Cause
Yeah.
If you're bored, you're boring. You know?
So if you wanted to fake it, just being absolutely an architecture nerd and being so into architecture
Right.
that it was unbelievable. Your books stacked up and paintings, and you would be writing notes about architecture and going to architecture museums, and that would be fascinating to a woman. Oh my God.
to some women, for
To
sure.
I think
Right.
many women would be
Right.
very attracted to, like, oh, this person's got something they're passionate about.
Yeah, he's got a deal. Yeah.
Right. So what about being funny? Because listen, I know I'm not the most attractive guy. Objectively, if I was going to get rated, I'd be rated like a 3. I'm not the ugliest guy.
OkCupid, it would be a lot harsher than that.
I'd be a 2.5 in OKCupid land.
Sure.
I'm not deluding myself. But I always thought I was a pretty funny guy. That's why I have my own talk show.
Sure, right. Yeah.
I mean, that, and I set up a couple cameras. But the point is, I think being funny means a lot.
Sure. Yeah,
And
of course.
being enthusiastic. That's why I think I always dated 4s and 5s when I was, in fact, the 2.
Well, I mean,
Now, did you ever correlate the 2s that actually went on the dates with the 4s?
it's
In other words, guys who were dating girls who were much more attractive to them objectively.
it first of all, that rarely happens on a dating site because that's one flaw in the system. It's very image oriented. Right? But it does happen. I mean, being funny helps on OkCupid. It helps in person. It helps everywhere.
Right.
But humor, enthusiasm, these are things that the mind can immediately pick up. But it's almost impossible to make an algorithm to pick up a joke, right?
Right.
So it's very hard for us to even recognize that that's going on. I think it is. I think a long-held belief by mankind that being funny helps romantically, and I'm sure it's true, but I don't have any data on that at all.
See, that would be if there was a way to get deeper into the data and know that. God, how would you even conduct that experiment?
It would be brutal. I mean, you'd have to figure out whether someone was funny or not, and that's
Right.
first
so
of all
if you
a
could
matter
figure
of
if
like.
somebody, you might be able to figure out if somebody was funny offline. So if you actually took 1,000 people and you could figure out if somebody was considered funny by their friends, and then took their OkCupid accounts.
Yeah, you could run some surveys and stuff, but like we always try to we try to stay away from surveys as much as possible on OkCupid.
Right.
We go, I mean, everything in the book, almost everything we do at the company is based on kind of observed data that people give us basically without us having to ask. So looking at what people click on, who they go out and message, rather than who they say they'll go message, because those things are often very different.
All right, this is the one that I think a lot of people find fascinating. Men is rated by women, and women rated as men. So it sort of gets to what we've been talking about here.
Yeah, these are the kind of these are just white to white to take the racial component out of it.
This takes the
I
racial
think.
component out of it.
Yeah.
Which I don't even know if we ever got anywhere with the race discussion, like other than, God, it's depressing in some ways.
Yeah,
and
it's a hard problem to confront.
Well, I do, but I have to say, I admire you as a data nerd. Can I call you a data nerd?
Sure.
That's probably accurate.
Yeah, why
I
not?
mean, you wrote a whole book about data.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
If anybody's a data nerd, it's you,
Right.
Christian. So the point is, I think it's so brave of you to put it out there. I mean, that must have, I remember when that came out 2 years ago or something, it was like really created a lot of discussion. Was there something that came out of the discussion that made you feel hopeful or good?
Well, that people were discussing it, and that like with something like this, like racism is a problem far beyond the reach of any dating site entrepreneur or data.
Yeah.
nerd. It's like a societal level thing, and I think what you can do is data like this that's hard, that's just evidence in general, I think, is very important to get into the discussion because there's so much taboo, there's so much emotion, there's denial, there's accusation, and having evidence of any kind thrown in there, I think, just helps clarify the discussion. Like, I mean, at least in online dating, and a person can decide for himself how far that extends into the rest of life, but there's no question there's like a certain amount of white privilege, or at least it's inverse, so black disprivilege or whatever you want to call it, and so there's all this debate about what does it exist, people,
Hundreds of years of slavery.
right, yeah, right,
Hundreds of years of
right.
segregation and racism. I mean,
Right, and people
we have
wanna
some
say-
reasons that we could fall back on that. This
Sure,
is
sure,
the case,
and
yeah.
but it's an ongoing. People want to say that society is post-racial. It doesn't matter what color you are. It matters that if you break the law, this kind of thing is bound to happen. The same types of things they're saying about Michael Brown or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that.
Yeah, we're all being proven wrong on that. I mean, I've said we're moving towards a post-race society.
Yeah.
And now you know what? I think I'm wrong.
Well,
I'm like getting kind of depressed about it. I kind of was hopeful because I see all these signs of it over here, and then I look to like other places like policing, and you see the opposite.
Well, it's got to be better than it was in the 50s, right? I mean, so...
I gotta hope, but I mean, it doesn't feel different, does it?
Well, it's just these things are very, like, these are like problems that transcend a human lifetime. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's longer than our lifetime.
It's
right?
insane to expect it
like
to be different over the course of 3 years or something.
100-year lens. Right, now, and this chart is very interesting, and I'm going to have you explain what the chart is, but not explain what's going on yet, because I'm going to tease it and then do a commercial.
Okay.
So here...
This is just a basic histogram of attractiveness
fancy
ratings.
word for bar chart.
Thank you. Sorry, a distribution of people's attractiveness on OKCupid. So the red is men's ratings as given to them by women, and the gray is women's ratings as given to them by the men.
And then the dark red is the overlap.
The dark red is the overlap. That's supposed to just be the transparency.
And so we're seeing that in this, just briefly before we go to commercial, that the men rating women feels like pretty close to a bell curve.
Yeah, it's a pretty well-centered distribution. Yeah.
Men rated by women.
Yeah, the women are much harsher.
Yeah. Really harsh.
They're very harsh.
And when we get back, we're going to discuss why that might be on This Week in Startups. Yes, Scott Walker is a great guy. I've known Scott Walker of the Walker Corporate Law Group for many years. He comes to all of our events. And I was like, who's this guy? He's hanging out at every event I do. Well, who is he? He's a lawyer who has decades of experience, and he's got lawyers who work with him who have decades of experience at those big, expensive law firms. But they run a boutique law firm that is focused on entrepreneurs and startups. What that means is they're not going to kill you on the fees because you have to pay some huge rent and some big skyscraper. No, they're going to charge you reasonable fees on a flat rate. That's right, fixed fees. So when you have to do something like raise money or do an M&A deal or a licensing agreement or terms of service, privacy policy, employment agreements, all that great stuff, he's going to give you the price and say, hey, this is going to cost $1,000, this is going to cost $2,000, cost $3,000, whatever it is, so you don't get sticker shock. He understands what it's like to be an entrepreneur because he's chosen to work with entrepreneurs, and he is an entrepreneur himself. The Walker Corporate Law Group, I recommend them to all startups and have for many years. And you can reach Scott directly at 415-979-9998. 979-9998. 415-979-9998. Or you can email Scott at walkercorporatelaw.com. Scott at walkercorporatelaw.com. Or visit walkercorporatelaw.com on your web browser. You can follow at Scott Ed Walker on Twitter, Scott Ed Walker. And he really spends a lot of time with founders. I know I've sent him, and I've told the stories here many times of different people I've sent to him, but I've sent people from the incubator, the launch incubator, from our hackathon, and just people who listen to the show have gone and used him and told me about the experience. He spends a lot of time with each founder. He's not watching the clock. He's helping you learn and grow as an entrepreneur because he's chosen to do this. He could work at a big firm. He could make probably twice as much money, 3 times as much money. He loves his lifestyle of working with entrepreneurs at the formation of their company and onward. So he makes that nice long-term relationship from the seed, from pre-seed to when they're forming their company, to the seed round, to the A round, to the B round, and on, even on to the acquisition. He's a great, great attorney, and I highly recommend him. Email Scott at walkercorporatelaw.com. Thanks again, Scott, for being a tireless supporter of startups and This Week in Startups. Let's get back to this amazing episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to This Week in Startups. You can follow the show at TWI Startups, and you can follow Christian Rudder at Christian Rudder, R-U-D-D-E-R, on the Twitter, and I'm at Jason. That's a pretty cool name to have, Rudder.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it lends itself to some.
God, man, all of high school must have been like, "You're heading in the right direction."
Yeah,
did teachers do that to you? Like, hey, your scores are heading in the right direction, Mr. Rudder.
No, teachers kind of left me alone. But
really,
yeah,
I would have tortured you. I would have been coming up with every pun possible. Like a joke.
Yeah, me and Jed were pretty
and
hard to deal with.
That's an interesting aside. You went to school in Arkansas, Little Rock.
Yeah, in Little Rock. Yeah.
With Jed, the founder of Ripple and Stellar, which are the 2 of the top 5.
And don't forget Mt. Gox.
And Mt. Gox.
And eDonkey.
And eDonkey.
Yeah.
Which was like a peer-to-peer sharing thing. But just in terms of like cryptocurrency, I mean, this guy, if anybody is Satoshi, it's him.
It's not.
All roads lead to Jed.
He has always been an early adopter of things. Like
you were friends with him since you were 10, 11?
11, yeah, I was 11.
So he was an early adopter of what?
Everything. I mean, punk rock, Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, I've learned so much random crap from that dude.
Wow.
I don't know.
So he was your dungeon master.
Yeah. Literally.
Literally, he rolled the 4-sided die. And
And mostly 20s, but yeah.
Mostly 20s.
Yeah, uh-huh.
But you do as a 4-sided die or a 30-sided die.
Occasionally,
and
when we were fighting hand-to-hand, there was a 4-sided die.
There was a 4-sided die
Yeah.
and hand-to-hand. My God, the nerditude on this show. Right now, there's like 3-4 people who are like, what are they talking about? What's a 4-sided die? Right. Look it up on the Google.
It's a tetrahedron.
You know what? I always loved the 4-sided die. I didn't know it was a tetrahedron. What were you were chaotic neutral, like me?
Yeah, or usually chaotic good, just because, I mean,
I was
you're
chaotic neutral.
out there killing goblins and shit.
I was a little kind of like Boba Fettish, you know what
Sure,
I'm saying, in
there
my
you go.
approach?
I think Boba Fett is probably chaotic evil in the Dungeons and Dragons world.
Is he really? I kind of think he's chaotic neutral because I think if Han Solo paid more, he would have like brought Darth Vader to Jabba the Hutt. I think whoever paid more, he would have done. I think it's very neutral.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I think he's a badass, but I think he's kind of neutral. Welcome to This Week in Nerds. My guest today, Christian Rudder and Jason Calacanis, talking about the alignment of their Dungeons and Dragons characters. What was that called?
Alignment.
Alignment,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It was your alignment. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I miss Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, it's an awesome game.
I would like to get like a 40-year-old guy Dungeon and Dragon thing going. That would be
It's sweet. I mean, we still play sometimes.
What?
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, Jet had kids, and then I have a kid. So
I would like to get invited to that.
It's pretty fun. Yeah, we were up on Mount Gundersnort. I think that's where the adventure stopped.
Really?
Yeah.
You all just got slaughtered. What happened? No healing potions?
Well, we
All
got
right.
frozen in time because we all had kids.
All right, well, I'm
So-
putting my invisible cloak on. And, okay, so here we go. Back to reality.
Uh-huh.
Looking at the OKCupid data,
Sure.
25 million people, whatever, hundreds of millions, billions of behaviors.
Yeah, lots of behavior.
Lots of scoring
There's lots
over
of
the
behavior.
decade. You guys have been in business for a decade, right?
Yep, we have.
All right, now this is confounding to me.
Well,
What is going on here that I would always think that men, and you write this in the book, which I thought was a fascinating point, men are trained by, we hear this narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Men have been trained by magazine covers, Photoshop magazine covers,
Spanx.
Spanx, plastic surgery,
Sure.
the insanity of Coors Light commercials. Everything tells men that, no offense, Coors Light, but whatever it is,
None
you know,
taken, I'm
Taste
sure.
of the Rockies, whatever.
Yeah.
Like that women are X, and if they're not X, they're nothing, right? Like if
Yeah.
they don't have these attributes, physical attributes.
Right, or that men just would absorb kind of unreasonable expectations of how real people should look.
All right, very well said there, Christian. Better than I could say it. Then, women, we all would like to think, would be more level-headed than guys who maybe are just, and it is true, guys are visually stimulated more than women. Women are orally stimulated with an A more than men in psychology. This is true, yes?
Sure, yeah.
This is proven in psychology.
No, I
right?
believe you. I'm just laughing at the pun.
Oh, well, I just want to make sure nobody thinks I'm being vulgar. But that is the truth. But then we see this crazy thing with women, and they're haters.
Well, I mean,
women are haters. They're all giving men twos.
Yeah, they are. I mean, and just to be clear, you know, the first and obvious reaction here is like, oh man, everybody, all the dudes on OKCupid are ugly. Let's shut the site down. It's over. And we actually went through this. We took 1,000 random dudes and comped them against 1,000 random guys of similar demographics from a social network and ran them both through the same apparatus. We come out the same score. So I think guys on OKCupid are just as average looking as the women.
So it's not that you have
It's not that they're
ugly
ugly,
guys.
right? It's thank you for saying it simply.
And you prove that because you, from what I read in the book, great book, Dataclysm, go buy it now. The point is, you looked at the photos of people on social media and you ran the numbers against those as well.
Yeah, we
so you did a little testy poo.
Yeah, we
and
did a little
figured it out.
testy poo. That's
Yeah.
exactly. I'm glad you used the technical term.
Yeah.
So the but I think what's going on here is that in online dating and in offline dating too, women in the straight case, men are the pursuers and women do the selecting. They pick which guy they want, right? And it's especially true online. And so this, I think, is just women being more selective with who they want to message. And in fact, and you see, we're now owned by IAC, so who also owns Match, also owns Tinder. So you can actually see these curves on those across all three properties. And so the more kind of, the more I'd say the sort of sex is on the table in terms of proposition of the website. Tinder is a little bit more casual. Match is a little bit less casual. And so
and
on
OkCupid
Tinder,
is in between.
Kind of in between, yeah. And so Tinder, those curves move even further apart. Match, they move closer together.
So let me repeat this back to you to see if I actually understood it. When scoring, women are more discerning because they believe that this could result in intimacy.
Yeah.
Men, perhaps, less discerning because they're up for intimacy on maybe a less discerning basis.
I think, I mean, the male curve barely moves. It's really the female curve that moves around.
Okay, so we'd
on
say
all three
men
of
are
these
just
things,
standard.
They're just like, I mean, they're kind of like down to whatever.
Right.
And so they kind of end up...
DTF, as the kids say.
Yes, DTF, exactly. Or DTD, down to date, whatever it is. But yeah.
Down to have fun for those
down
people.
To have
if
so
my
much
mom's
fun.
watching, just means down to have fun, Mom.
Yeah, exactly. So the men kind of have the same curve on all three sides, and it's the female curve that moves around.
Interesting. What do you think the impact is, since it's a sister company, of Tinder? Because now you're looking at the arc of your career and the arc of what you created. I'm assuming you're a 35-year-old guy or something?
I'm a 39-year-old guy, yeah.
You're a 40-year-old, basically. I don't mean to make you feel old.
That's all right.
But as an old dude, you look at this young thing coming out, Tinder, that's like I guess used primarily by 20-somethings.
Yeah, primarily, yeah.
What do you does it say something about the nature of how millennials versus Gen Xers want to date and how they date?
Well, I mean, I don't know. You know, when Tinder first came out, I think in a vacuum I would have said this, what you just said, and you know, but this has been the best year over year for OKCupid too. It hasn't been eating away at our user base. I think honestly, Tinder has really been has kind of knocked down or destroyed that last bit of stigma around meeting someone through a device or through a computer.
Got it.
Kind of to get back from your earlier comments about you know chat rooms and BBSs and stuff back when there was a ton of stigma around it, and that kind of eliminated it, I think.
And really, it's the mobile phone, because mobile phones are cool.
Yeah,
and this is
the
just
coolness, the pervasiveness, the
Right.
ease, and I think it's a great service. And I think it's introducing people to, I mean, to get businessy. It's just kind of growing the segment, you know. So it's been very good for us.
What about the nature of how people become intimate and date? Because as explained to me, and I don't know if this is just fear-mongering or people being exaggerating a little bit. Young people today like to perhaps hook up and then determine if they want to have a relationship, and sex is less about a relationship leads to sex as opposed to sex can lead to a relationship. Is that true, or is that just some bizarre perception that old people have, like, nah, you know, these young whippersnappers are having one-night stands or sex on the first date, nah.
I mean, to be honest, I don't know. You know,
Yeah.
like one of the kind of tragedies of running a dating site is you never, especially if you're interested in data, you never get any data on the dates. You don't get any data on sex. You only know that very first kind of interaction of like, hey, what's up? You look cool. Hey, you want to get a beer? That's pretty much our entire exposure to the process. So I don't know.
What about gay data, bi data, all this kind of stuff? Trans, like you guys obviously have those users in the system as well. Is there a difference when you look across statistics? We looked at race as one.
I mean, in terms of like
vector.
what they're looking for in a relationship or kind of the general approach to sex and life, there's no difference.
No difference?
No.
What about gay men and gay women? Because I'm quite an expert on this.
Okay.
Because I watch The L Word.
Okay, sure.
And additionally, I watch, what's the gay show on HBO? Somebody help me out here. Everyone running producer Jackie, do a quick Google search. What's the show that I've been watching on HBO about the gay guys? And it's not, The Sopranos is a lot of gay guys. That's true. Paulie Walnuts. Tons of jokes there. No, I watched The L Word, and then I watched not Queer as Folk. It's the new one. I love these gay shows. It's fascinating to me.
Game of Thrones?
Looking, thank you. There it is. Game of Thrones. No, it's not.
It's a lot of leather.
You're a funny dude, man, in like a really non-obvious way. Okay, but then you have this concept in the lesbian world, this stereotypical thing, U-hauling. They're looking to...
Sure.
U-hauling is the term they use on The L Word for like,
Right,
they meet each other and they
immediately
move
move in. Right, sure.
And then gay guys, you have the opposite thing on looking, which is, hey, we're dating, but by all means, you can have casual sex with another person. Does that come out in the numbers? Do you have like a high frequency for gay men and then a low frequency for women? They like leave the site for a year and then come back and U-haul again?
No, I mean, the U-Haul component, we don't really know because we're not out renting trailers to people.
But you would know that that they would come to the site and then disappear and go dark for a while.
But see,
right?
that's the thing that sucks about it is that we don't know. But they could go dark because they hate OKCupid or because
that's a fair point.
they moved to France, and I don't know. You know, so like we try not to infer things that we have no information on. You do see a little bit there are more gay men on average have this roughly the same number of, say, sex partners, at least self-reported sex partners, as the other groups. They do. There is a kind of higher likelihood of extreme promiscuity, or self-reported again.
Yeah.
Among gay men, but again, this data is a little. I mean, it's useful, and I think people are generally honest, but it's definitely noisier than our normal stuff.
Well, if people are self-reporting, it's going to be totally
Yes.
different, right? Like,
Right, of course.
I think some guys, like heterosexual guys, I'm just thinking out loud here, might report like, yeah, I've had all these conquests.
Sure, right.
Women might lower the number of conquests to
Right.
be,
Yeah.
more bashful or whatever.
Right.
Like, there's
in
all
terms
kinds
of
of
in terms of
weirdness.
self-reporting, which at least indicates some norm. They're at least working to some shared set of expectations if the number is all the same.
All right, what about this one with the man's age versus the age of women who look best to him?
Oh, let's see.
Because
Okay,
men
that's-
seem to be
it's a
pretty.
tiny little chart.
It's a tiny little chart. I'm trying to zoom in on it. We'll zoom in on it in post. But I can't seem to get this one to zoom in here. Let
It's
me
okay.
see if I can. Oh, there we go. Here we go. Boom, boom, boom.
Computers got us. Now it's so big.
Oh, God. Now it's too big. Enter full screen. Boom. Let me zoom out a little bit. Okay, here we go.
Oh,
a man's
nice. Well
age
done.
versus the age of women who look best to him.
Okay,
So age range entered as a search preference.
yeah, so this is kind of the end of a series of charts in the book that I kind of like build up to a conclusion. The conclusion here being that those numbers in red, first the numbers in black on the left, the far left, are the age of the men stating the preference, or showing the
So
preference.
50-year-old men are stating a preference of a 22-year-old woman?
That's the observed preference. Those are the women they rate hottest. Yeah. So basically,
my God.
Yeah. So men pretty much, as no matter how old they are, think the youngest possible women are the hottest.
It's literally 20, 21, 23, and then for some reason 45-year-olds go as old as, I'm
it's just
laughing
some
here,
noise.
24 years old.
Right.
But that's their implicit behavior.
Yeah, that's their observed behavior. Yeah.
They clicked and rated higher 20 to 24-year-olds.
Yeah, right. So men get older, but their tastes don't necessarily grow up.
But the
That's how I would
preference
put
they
it.
put in when
The-
they explicitly stated it,
Right. So the explicit statement is that kind of gray swath, and so as you can see,
35 to 50
Right.
or 30 to 50,
Yeah,
they
so
said they were open to all those ranges, but their clicks were on the 20-year-olds.
Right, of course, yeah. But the interesting thing in the book, I expand on this and compare it to how women rate men, the reverse. So
Yeah, and what's the reverse?
women want a man to be basically their same age. So like in this same
Interesting.
chart, like a 25-year-old woman thinks 25-year-old guys are hottest, 30 to 30, 35 to 35. At 40, so I'm 39. At 40, that's kind of when guys hit the wall. So women who get old, the women will keep getting older there, but they would prefer a guy not get any older. To use the analogy from over there.
So
like a 45-year-old
women will
woman.
pick somebody their same age, but when they hit 45, they'll pick 40.
Yeah, they kind
At
of
50,
stop
they'll
at
pick 39.
Yeah, the progression sort of stops at 40.
Got it. So
roughly.
they'll want to be in sync with the age, and then when they become a quote-unquote cougar, as my wife, who just turned 40, is fond to joke about, the cougar crowd wants younger men, as
Sure.
is the stereotype.
Yeah, and
Interesting.
women's kind of implicit and explicit preferences align a lot more than the men's. There isn't that divergence. They kind of say what they want, and then they go and do that same thing.
I think this goes back to, because, I was a psychology major in undergrad, and so I have just enough information to get myself in trouble. But theories of causation, which you're a correlation guy, but a psychologist would be a causation person. The causation here, I could see two. One is, if you're asking to visually rate somebody, just young people might actually be physically more attractive.
Sure,
They have
sure.
less wrinkles.
Yeah, that's no secret. I mean, if you go look at covers of magazines or
Sure.
who's a model, they're all young.
Yeah. Now, the second thing, though, is on a biological imperative, I wonder where fertility is the highest. I'm going to guess, and without knowing, that, actually, we all know for a fact that as you get to 40, your fertility would go down for women, and
Sure.
at 20, you would probably, I don't know if that's the peak or not, but it's
Yeah, who
definitely
knows?
up there in the peak.
Sure.
So this could be on a causation basis, maybe.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some like
A biological imperative.
things going on. Yeah,
Yeah.
and like I've talked to people who work at 538, Nate Silver's blog, and people at Facebook, and anybody who works with big data will say the more time you spend with it, the more it kind of confirms your intuition about people, but it adds a specificity to it that's interesting, where you can actually go look at the numbers. Like, it is no secret that guys like younger women for perhaps these reasons that you're laying out. But it's cool to be able to go look and say, oh, they really, here's the data
this
on
is
that.
black
fact.
and white to a
Right.
level that is it almost seems comical.
Right, exactly, yeah. That's a good way to put it, actually. Yeah, it's so specific that it becomes funny. How true to type people can be, which is one of the things that I like the most about, whatever, doing my job, doing what I do.
So do you have all this data? Is there any data that you didn't release that you looked at and said radioactive, or I just don't want it to be out there? I suppose not, because you put out the most radioactive thing I can imagine, which is saying that one type of woman is rated a full point lower than everybody else.
Right. I mean, there's nothing that's really, after that, especially, there's nothing really that radioactive in there. There's definitely plenty of stuff I didn't talk about, or I didn't get to, or didn't think to get to. Somebody suggested that I should kind of look at how people maybe get more desperate the longer they're on OKCupid, and maybe their standards relax.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it would be very interesting, which I haven't looked at. Obviously, we have the data on that. So
That's a really
there's all
interesting
kinds of
one.
interesting stuff in there.
Because I can tell you, watching my wife talk to her friends who are 10 years younger, like, they go from being extremely high standards in a mate, and I watch her convince them, like, to settle, and then I'm just like, sweetie, I don't understand. Why are you asking them to settle when you never settled? And this is super hypocritical. And then she laughs and she goes, I kind of did. What about experiments? Because Facebook did, as you know, experiments where they tried to make people
I know
more depressed.
Now, see, I
Or
have an issue
they
with that.
introduced them. You explain to me your understanding of the study.
Well, they changed people's newsfeed to take to show, they have a little script that recognizes supposedly negative content, and they showed more of that content to people and wanted to see what would happen. And that's people complaining about their breakfast or that they're stuck in traffic versus, oh, hey, my kid just won an award. I mean, it's the same stuff.
They dialed up the negative.
They did. Right. But I think the intent, attributing an intent to that is wrong, because, Schadenfreude is a thing. It's a perfectly plausible that might have made people happier. Be like, my friend's life sucked. My life is awesome,
All right, but.
Right. It turned out, now that it turned out that it made people post more negative stuff themselves, but by a very small amount, like a 0.5%, I think, more likely.
So an amount that is notable, but perhaps not significant. Noticeable, but not significant.
I would say, I think it was statistically significant, but not notable.
Yeah, because but now let me ask you this. When doing an experiment.
And to be clear, and I'm sure all your listeners realize this, every single site is running experiments all the time.
They are.
Of course, right.
Now, what experiments have you done?
I mean, we experiment with all kinds of stuff on OKCupid.
Give me a couple that you did that actually had a result that we would find interesting or fascinating, or that made you change the business in some way.
Well, they all lead to a business change, no matter how mundane. So you change
which ones were the most significant?
You change the layout of an email or whatever, and clicks go up,
fine.
this kind of thing.
That's UX change, but let's do behavioral change. Now
Well, I'm definitely not trying to debate you on this, but
no, let's debate. That's the whole point of the show.
but
let's get into
it. In a website where people are that people are using to mediate their lives, whether it's OkCupid or Facebook, even the simplest UX change could have lasting repercussions. If we change the size of pictures, or how we order the pictures, or even the text that gets you to click. If we say we change some verb, whatever, like you might in an email subject line, and for whatever reason that resonates on you, you click that day, you see someone that you meet, you might marry that person, right? That's so that experiment, quote, has changed your life. Or it didn't. You didn't go there and you didn't have your life altered in any way. So I think it's a false distinction between UX changes, algorithmic changes. It's all part and parcel of what we do.
I disagree.
Okay, fair enough.
And here's why.
Okay.
What if, but because I do think that some of these things could affect somebody in a very negative way, and you would have to think about maybe getting their permission. So in the example of the Facebook one, bombarding somebody with negative signals, if the person, let's say there were 10 people out of 10,000, right? Not even 1%, 10 bips, who were borderline suicidal, borderline manic, whatever, and were on antidepressants and maybe had the wrong dose, and 3 or 4 of them could have easily been tipped over into suicidal thoughts, might there not be some judgment that needs to be given to non-psychologists bombarding the public with negative ideas? What if somebody killed themselves over it?
But I mean,
Certainly it's possible.
Well, there's a lot of things that are possible. I mean, imagine Facebook made a game that made people really excited and loved to play, and therefore they became more sedentary and had a heart attack. So, I mean, like you're like,
all right,
you're
fair enough.
running down some very long rabbit hole here.
I did talk to Mark Pincus about that, and I said, Mark, how does it feel to waste everybody's time with Farmville? He said,
sure, right.
How many coins are they buying?
Right.
But
so,
anyway.
So, like, I mean,
all right, but there is a big difference.
But in bombarding is I think the people who ran the experiment would disagree with that word as well. Like, it's a tweak to all of these algorithms are. Whether it's Netflix recommending a movie, Facebook choosing some of your friends' news to show you, OKCupid choosing a person to show you, Amazon telling you what book you might want to buy next. There's no solved way to do these things. There are experiments run on these things all the time.
There is in the psychology space, and as you know, I have an undergraduate degree from Fordham University in psychology, you do get peer-reviewed, and you review the experiment to make sure that
for some, but not all experiments.
Not all, but it becomes obvious.
What becomes obvious?
For psychologists, it becomes obvious to them when there is a potential for harm, i.e. the Milgram studies, which I'm sure you are aware of.
I am aware of the Milgram studies.
Had profound impact on the people who took them.
Sure, but they were putting people like...
in shocks.
And,
they were shocking people.
I mean, they were pretending to shock people, but yeah.
Yeah.
So, but...
They were basically being Nazis on command. And they learned that they had the ability to be an SS officer.
But that's just an extreme example that's not necessarily pertinent here. So
you have not done any Nazi experiments on the OKCupid people you can confirm?
Not that we can confirm. Yes, exactly.
You can confirm you have not done that.
Right. I mean, look.
But what about this? Have you done, let me ask you a question. Because this would be a little bit controversial. I think, or maybe not. If you, in fact, knew that Asian men, I think on that chart, like maybe had the least attraction to African American women. It would make sense to not waste their time with more African American women, or if African American women never looked at Asian men or never considered them, you wouldn't want to waste their time showing them a bunch more Asian women. You would tailor them to the race that matters most to them. Do you do that? Do other dating sites do that, do you think?
No, we don't do that exact thing, but we do look at how attractive person A is and then how attractive person B is when deciding whether to show B to A. We do look at that.
So it is happening on an algorithmic basis, but not on a race basis necessarily.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It looks at your score. There's some randomness involved. It looks at a lot of different things, and so the way we surface people are what we're optimizing for is the likelihood that if A is the searcher, that A will message and have a conversation with somebody that we're going to show them. So similarity and attractiveness is a big predictor of that, and that gets involved in the algorithm, of course.
So there is an algorithm that is steering us to our mates.
Of course. I mean, we have a 250,000 active users in New York City alone. Like, we can only show 10 at a time. So given that you're not just randomly pulling people from the database, in which case your site would be
And what about the Love is Blind Day?
Sure. That's...
Explain what that is.
Love is Blind Day was the day that, 8 hours, where we turned off all the photos on OkCupid as a promotion for a blind dating app that we had made poorly.
And it resulted in what?
First of all, it resulted in people being like, what the hell is going on here, and not using OkCupid very much that day.
Right.
The secondary effect was the people that did stick around, it turns out had, better than normal conversations. They exchanged contact information more often. The conversations went deeper and had a higher velocity. But then when we kind of turned the lights back on, so to speak, there were a lot of conversations obviously still in progress at that time. And you could see people kind of spook and be like, and then so as soon as they got to see each other, those conversations tended to die off super fast. So it was a kind of like, it's like last call at the bar or whatever, at 4 a.m. They like turn on all the lights and everyone's like, holy shit, I'm drunk, I gotta go home. And that was kind of like how it worked at OkCupid.
See, the interesting thing for me is I wonder sometimes with these collaborative filtering, Netflix algorithm, if we're sending our society to go so deep into the things they already like, that are we so obsessed with engagement and increasing engagement, are we not sending people down a rabbit hole of their own existing preferences and then, in a way, not giving them a broader spectrum of what the world has to offer.
For sure. I think you're right. We do. I mean, we don't do collaborative filtering on OKCupid, though,
Right.
for whatever that's worth. But
so if your friends like somebody, it's not that you're going to like them.
Yeah, we
Is
don't
that
even
actually
know.
is not accurate, probably.
Yeah, we don't even know who your friends are
Yeah.
on OKCupid. So, like, I agree. I mean, that's why I like reading the newspaper in paper form, because you can just kind of look at a bunch of stuff and pick out what you like rather than have to trust the Times algorithm to try to figure out what I'm going to be into. So,
For every time we send people down a algorithmically more, 1% more interesting to you, in a way there needs to be a counter where we say to people, hey, we know that you have this, type of book, type of movie, type of person that you like. There is a way to have this serendipity and meet somebody who is outside or read a story that's outside of what you normally...
Yeah, I mean, we explicitly add randomness into our algorithm. So,
Yeah.
so we do recognize that. And also, just to clarify one thing, like, we don't really ever look at engagement in the classic way of like time on site or number of page views, because online dating is a weird thing. We're trying to affect a real world meeting that doesn't involve us. People meet through OkCupid originally or exchange messages, and then they go have a drink or a coffee or whatever. We're out of that transaction. So we're actively trying to get people off the site rather than keep them there, like in a Farmville type way.
How do you maintain a successful business when success is getting people to stop using your service?
Right. It's a good question. I mean, because when someone gets married because of OkCupid, all the guests know about that fact, for example. So it's incredible marketing to have people just go on dates. First of all, your roommate asks, hey, where are you going? Going on a date. Where'd you meet her? OkCupid. That conversation's happened a million times. Then there's these weddings or whatever. That's the best marketing we could possibly ever get. We've never paid for any marketing.
So for every client you lose, it's an endorsement for the next 10 clients to embrace the service.
Right. In theory, yeah. Right. And that it seems to be working. I mean, we have grown very, very steadily since we started, and we're probably the biggest dating site in the U.S. at this point, and our kind of efficacy has been our calling card.
So you obviously have had tremendous success as an entrepreneur, building one of the legendary sites of the last decade on the internet, certainly in the top 200 or 300, and certainly in the top most impactful, like leading to people's marriages and babies in the world.
Yeah, there's a lot of babies running around.
A lot of babies running around with your fingerprints on them, or I should say OkCupid. Now, if you could look at any data set for the entrepreneurs who are listening, what data sets do you think represent the opportunity for the next 10 years?
Man, that's a big question. I mean...
With some data we are just starting to collect, we're just
Right.
starting to have available.
Right.
Where do you think the opportunities are in big data?
I mean, this is going to sound like such a boring answer. I mean, I think other than OkCupids, Facebook has a very sexy and powerful data set, but they're obviously, that's the obvious answer. I think the one thing... in trying to put together this book, which talks about a lot more stuff besides just OkCupid, I was very excited at the beginning to look at Twitter and Pinterest and all these other data sets that are out there. But unfortunately, a lot of these experiences are so self-contained. Like Twitter just is kind of its own universe. It doesn't really pertain to the real world in the sense that they don't know how old you are. They don't know whether you're a man or woman. They have no idea why you're there, any of this stuff. And so all they really know about is how you use Twitter, right?
Right.
And like that's interesting to a degree, but isn't interesting in a sociological way.
You can't say how many men follow how many females, how many females reply or favorite men, or by age.
Right, exactly. It's people interacting with news and people writing things, but not necessarily people interacting with each other in a way that you can kind of tie back to the core idea of who those people are. Yeah, especially race. Like, who knows, what your race is? You have a picture of Grover and some avatar of yourself. Who knows, on Twitter.
I think what's very interesting about your subtitle is, how we think when no one is looking. How aware do you think people are at the end of the day of what their biases and true intents are? In other words, how many people are living in the matrix and how many people are self-aware?
I think very few people are self-aware. I mean, and I'm sure I'm there. I mean, any person has lots of things about themselves they don't realize,
Blind spots.
Sure, of course. Yeah, me too. But I don't think people there certainly with things like race or attractiveness preferences or whatever, people do things that they would never explicitly own up to, or even realize that they're doing. And so,
yeah, that's sort of my most I think it's sort of the most interesting part of your book is, are we even aware of what drives us?
right, exactly. And well, that's I mean, psychology as a field would be very different if we were aware, because someone could just be like, well, here it is, guys. So instead, you have to do all these studies to tease this out.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why that's why I'm very excited about the use of this data, because I think it can help people who do this research professionally, which isn't me, get a better sense of what drives people, what people do, why they do it, how they work, how society works.
Yeah, that is the interesting thing, because the first time, I mean, sort of what Dataclysm kind of teaches us, the book, is for the first time we actually have this data.
Right, exactly.
You know, like this would be naturalistic observation in the psychology world, which means you'd have to put people on street corners to check boxes.
Right, and
it
even then it
impossible.
comes down to their opinion of what they think you're doing.
Exactly.
Right,
This
exactly.
is sad. You know, it's almost like the NBA. I know you're an NBA fan.
I
You
do
bring
like
up the
the
NBA
NBA.
a bunch.
Yeah.
The NBA now, you know, it used to be an assist would be something that was arbitrary by the statisticians at the game. So the home team could,
Right, sure, they pile up assists.
You know, they
yeah,
might
right.
pile up a couple of extra assists where the away team might not get as many.
Right.
But now they have cameras over each arena marking where everybody is and the distance of the defender to the person shooting, so that you can actually see which defenders by how many feet are beating or missing.
Yeah, the NBA has insane game logging. They know every step that those guys take. It's pretty crazy.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Listen, I could talk to you for 5 hours, and we're going to have you back. Here's your assignment. I want you to write another book just about the NBA. And we just sit here and talk about NBA and Dungeons and Dragons. You're a fascinating dude.
Thanks, man.
Dataclysm, Who We Are When We Think No One Else Is Looking, by Christian Rudder. This book is amazing. I'm like I said, I'm about a third of the way into it, and I am really, really enjoying it. I think this is a must-read for anybody who is an entrepreneur, because, again, the data leads to the changes in the UX and the actual
exactly.
product.
Right. I mean, that's where the book came from, because we do this kind of stuff all day at OKCupid to make the site work, and we eventually realized that some of it was interesting in a kind of general way.
And Aziz Ansari, he gave you a little blurb
Gave
on the
me a
back.
nice little blurb, yeah.
The comedian.
Yeah, yeah, not just his namesake programmer friend. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like. So what's the story with that? He was looking for material to make goofs on, and he ran across it. He started making jokes about your OKCupid data.
No, he is working on a book about relationships, and he got in touch with me, obviously because of my connection
Yeah.
to OKCupid. We had lunch a few times. I mean, we're not friends or anything like that, but he's a cool dude, and read the book.
Errol
and liked it.
Morris also blurbed your book.
Yeah.
How do you have all this ball? And then you have Jane McGonigal. I mean, these are like serious heavyweights. How'd you get Errol Morris to do your?
Errol, I know because my best friend, also a roommate of Jed's, worked for Errol as his kind of personal assistant to a research assistant, but kind of like super research assistant.
I
Like
got
did
you.
a lot of his homework on the stuff that Errol does.
Yeah. Wow.
So we knew him. The friend's name is Justin, and Justin kind of was the sort of big brother to Hamilton Morris, who's Errol's son, who does all the drug stuff for Vice now. But we knew Hamilton when he was 12,
Hamilton's the dude who goes out and
takes any kind of drug.
really.
Yeah,
And then he writes about
for
it.
Vice. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have director Jacob for that. I have Jacob goes out
Sure.
and takes all those drugs, and we videotape it, and we put it on This Week in
It's
Drugs.
perfect. It's great content.
Exactly. Hey, listen, and you had NPR made this one of the books of the year.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Oh, congratulations on
Thank
that,
you.
dude. Here's what I think
Thanks
you
very
should
much.
do. Let me give you some career advice. Free career advice from Jason. Okay, quit your job, number one. Okay, enough with what you're doing at OKCupid. You put your decade in. Quit your job, and I want you to just do the next book. One book on basketball. This way I can have something that I just want to geek out of, particularly if you could just do the Knicks. 30 years
that
of
would be
Knicks
fucking
losing.
tough.
Just do
Yeah,
all
right.
the ways the Knicks have figured out how to give away draft picks.
Just
Patrick Ewing.
title the book L, and that would
Yeah,
be pretty much
losers.
it. Yeah.
Depression, the Knicks story. But then second, God almighty, if you did a book on race today and you could just take race apart on a data basis, I think it would be very helpful for society. I think that you did your time at the startups, you made enough money, I'm sure. You got that equity in Match.com and the whole spin out or whatever's going to happen with you guys
Who knows?
that I heard about, who knows. You need to just write books.
Well, thanks.
This is
Yeah.
your calling. Enough with the startup stuff. Make
I'll
another
write
2 books.
another
All right,
at
listen,
some
you got to
point,
go.
for sure.
This has been amazing. Everybody follow Christian Rudder. He's a brilliant dude. Everybody sign up for OKCupid and Dataclysm.org. NPR's list of the best books of 2014 includes Dataclysm. It is amazing. Brain Pick, it's put on their list of best science books as well. And thanks again to Emmy Award-winning producer Jackie and my director Jacob, and to our sponsors. Thank you so much. Follow us on the Twitter at TWI Startups, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.